Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIIM Growth Partners podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Kfir Yeshayahu, the co-founder of Ironvest. Kfir, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Could we begin with a brief introduction to yourself and your background, please?
Of course. So I've been in cybersecurity and then AI for about 25 years now. Started, back in the day, then moved to some, larger companies like Microsoft, Intel. Had my time in a few startups to back to Amazon after a period of studies at MIT. And then started Ironvest with a group of co-founders that went with me for the long journey. We know each other for many years. It was the right time to start Ironvest. My main background is, I'm a technologist, turned reluctantly to a business technology person, kind of in between. So that's what I'm bringing to the team and to the company. And we've been in business for about over 3 years now. Raised a couple rounds, built cool products, went to market. So it's been a hell of a ride. Happy to share more.
Thank you. Talk to me specifically around what made you focus specifically on the problems you're solving in fraud prevention. Why was that a cause that was one you thought needed tackling?
Yeah. So the why is a good question. And, it's been a while since we phrased it to ourselves properly. But I guess when we came together as a group to think about the company, we started by thinking about the problems. The problem was fraud as a whole, right? We are focused on financial services mostly for reasons that we can discuss later. But when you think about the internet, fraud and cybersecurity is still a massive problem, despite countless of companies and countless of efforts to solve that. And we had our type of solution and idea of how to tackle that in a way that we thought it could, I don't want to say eliminate fraud, but if used correctly and implemented correctly and grown correctly the way we imagine it, could be massive. And the way philosophically that we thought about it was think about what causes fraud in many of the cases, if not all of them. What enables the fraudster to commit the crime is the separation between action and identity. If you and I are talking right now, and if I leave the room and someone else come in and continue the conversation, I doubt that you're going to continue the conversation the way it started, share personal information, ask questions, believe the answers, right? It's just not going to happen. It sounds ludicrous in the real world, right? But in the digital world, that's what's happening all the time, right? Someone is doing account takeover. Now they are different. Now they are me, right, in front of the bank, right? The malware operates on my behalf, right? So this detachment between the identity and the actual action is what giving the in or the way in to many of the fraudsters, right? We validate identity usually at the login, and then there's a bunch of actions happening. Who knows who did them, if it's a person, machine, etc. So this, a little bit of a philosophical idea to join the action with the identity led to, 1,000 iterations on, patents that we wrote and technologies that we prototyped, etc. And we ended up using, as you mentioned, biometrics, computer vision, a lot of deep understanding about the client-side devices and anomaly detection in the backend, data collection from the client side, etc. And we merged all that using fairly unique cryptography. We merged all that into a sealed transaction, basically, that seal the identity with the action that's happening in the website. Now that sounds, okay, what is he even talking about? In reality, what we are doing is that we are collecting a lot of the information on the client side, including biometrics, including videos, including screen, etc. Everything is obviously fully permissioned and the user is well aware. It's not a tracking device. And we merged all that in sophisticated ways so that the service at the other end of the transaction has an irrefutable proof that David performed this action at this time, and this is what I'm seeing. If anything at all, malware, man in the middle, coffee break attack, whatever, account takeover, if anything at all is changing that irrefutable bind between identity and action, we catch it immediately in a Boolean way. It's not some risk indicator or risk factor that we give you 75% that it's not David, blah, blah, blah. We know in a Boolean way, binary way, that this is not what was supposed to happen. And this technology is now implemented, is now also deployed, and we make additional, obviously, improvements and keep evolving it into the world of AI, deepfake, etc. I'll pause here because I get excited about it, but I'll let you ask the follow-ups.
Fraud is nothing new, and there's a lot of fraud prevention players in this space. So I think you probably alluded to it already with the kind of Boolean capabilities you have, or the underlying Boolean methodology. But talk to us a little bit more about what Ironvest is doing differently in this space to many of the other vendors out there.
Yeah. So that's always a good question. Ironvest is doing something that, as of now at least, no one else is doing. This complete bind that's continuous between what the user is doing to who the user is, and all of that is pretty much unique. When we map the space, there's people who deal with login, authentication, identity management. Right, that's on the beginning of the journey. There are people who deal with behavioral biometrics and transaction monitoring and anomaly detection and all of that. That's layers of statistical analysis on structured telemetry that is collected from the device, right? So I'm using the device, the way I'm using it, it may not seem like a human is using it, right? So there's an alert coming up. It says, 78% it's not there. Now you need to orchestrate this alert and maybe send a step-up authentication to verify the identity, or send the case to manual review. The third types of vendors is everyone is doing the step-up, right? And there's a lot of those, right? Everything from SMS OTP, the classic ones, to magic links and passkeys and SIM-based authentications and orchestrators to orchestrate all that, what have you. What Ironvest is doing is taking a different approach. We are saying, we are with you throughout the transaction, end to end, collecting everything that everyone collected, plus the stuff that we are collected from the screen, from the camera, etc. And we are analyzing end to end what is happening on your device. We see what you see. It's like seeing behind your shoulder. And we tell the service, the bank or the financial institution, and later on when we expand also to the enterprise, etc., it's the right transaction. Yes, you can approve that, right? Or no, that's not the right transaction. You can't approve it, right? So we take a different approach into this stack with a different type of technology. With some of those vendors, we can, and we are collaborating and partnering. Some of them we are just replacing down the stack, right? So instead of layering a bunch of fraud prevention technologies, we cut through the stack and just give a full-blown answer that you don't need all the orchestrations and layers and all of that stuff. It's a very interesting space. Kind of taking a step back to answer your question. It's a very interesting space with a lot of players. We view ourselves as a next generation solution in this space. So far, we're not seeing anyone taking, a similar approach or as bold as we are taking. Hopefully it will pay off, and we'll see.
So we'll come on to how it is paying off in a second, but just to make sure that I've kind of understood that and followed that correctly, it sounds like what I'm hearing is there's kind of two real kind of overarching ways which Ironvest is doing things sort of differently, and it's following that kind of end-to-end process. You mentioned a lot of the other players in the space will be sitting at the kind of identity access management layer, or they might be sitting at the kind of more reactive of, we've analyzed all this looks fraudulent, and it's kind of behavioral analysis. That's one method. And secondly, you're kind of enriching a lot of this information through kind of biometrics. Is that a fair kind of summary?
Yeah, I think it is. From when the client think about us, they have two more differentiators in mind that we didn't even think about it this way at the beginning, but that's what we are hearing from the market, right? One is the Boolean aspect of the solution. And by Boolean, I mean, it's not just that we are giving a yes/no answer as opposed to like a risk score. It's everything that comes with a statistical answer. Statistical answer entails or requires you to have a whole set of orchestration and decision making and rules and stuff like that, right? So that's one thing that we are doing differently. And the other thing is the type of information that we collect, right? That enables later features like, you know, the trail of the action, evidence for everything that happened, etc. So we collect information that up until recently it was deemed very hard to process and collect, right? It's what's called, unstructured data, video, photo, things like that that are not telemetry, right? Not numbers in a table or a stream of numbers. We went and said, okay, this is something that now is possible to collect, analyze, and make sense of at scale. And, we took that bet at the right time because I think now it's becoming even better, right? In terms of our ability to give really good answer by collecting the types of information that everyone was kind of avoiding before that.
And presumably having all of this track record, it helps with the explainability element, I presume, as well.
Exactly. And we're also not only looking for anomalies in past, history, etc. We're also able to prevent an attack before it happens. And that's, by the way, also another big difference that we're hearing, right? Prevention versus detection. A lot of the tools are detection tools, which means that the fraud happened, and then you go back and you get an alert, you see that it already happened, and try to react. This is a more proactive, preventative tool. It just turned out to be this way because we can tell even without some of the history or the anomaly detection and all that, which we do, right? We do also the layers of anomaly detection, but we can sometimes say, yeah, that's not David, right? That's the David did log in to the app or to the website, but now when the actual transaction is happening, David typed something different than what we see in the server. Probably there's a malware that's doing some remote access and changing his transaction after David already logged in with all the 2-factor and 3-factor and no matter how many factors, right? So we basically take all this identity, 2-factor, step up, and detection tools, combine them into one, and just walk you through the experience and give the bank a final answer. Is this legit or not? And by the way, one thing that I didn't mention before is that with that technology, which again, something that we didn't necessarily realize at the beginning, because we come from, heavy fraud and cyber and AI. We are all kind of enthusiast technologists and fraud prevention people and cyber people. One thing we didn't realize at the beginning is the experience becomes a lot more, fluent or not fluent, but frictionless, right? Throughout the site. So imagine all of those, now you get an SMS, you need to type it in, or you get a QR, you need to take a picture or whatever, right? All of those, or worst case, call the contact center or go to the branch, or we are seeing everything, right? In terms of approving, denying transaction. Now you're just doing what you do. We are in the background. We are not interfering with anything you do. You do the action that you're supposed to do, and that's it. And once we show people this experience, and once this experience is embedded in the website, it's like, this is like me, talking to the banker on the branch, right? They're not asking me to do a bunch of step ups and calling somewhere else, go stand on one leg, jump twice, right? Just not happening in our experience, which makes banks, or I would say the product people in the banks, really love the solution.
I think that's so interesting. A couple of things you mentioned there would I'd like to kind of unpack a little bit further. That it sounds like they were sort of unintentional discoveries you've made since kind of building the business, building the products. And the first one was specifically around the kind of more proactive nature. I think cybersecurity generally is in such a reactive mindset. The second one being specifically about removing friction, because I think specifically with your target clients being in the financial space, friction's massively important. So with those two things in mind, talk to me around how you're really kind of using those insights to drive Ironvest forward.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say it's it's never a shame to admit that you discover new things during the process, right? No one has all the wisdom at the very beginning, and it's all about, it sounds cliche, but it's really all about listening to the clients, to the market, to what they need. Not necessarily listening to their solution, to propose solution, but definitely listening to their problems, right? And also getting feedback about your own ideas and products, right? So sometimes we would present a solution, and from the feedback, we would either change it or we would present it differently the next time, right? The client might say, oh, this is actually what I care about here is not that you are reducing the fraud significantly because I'm already locking up all of my processes, right? And I don't have fraud because everything is locked up. If you want to transfer more than $100, you need to go to the branch, right? So no, I don't have any fraud. But then the person sitting next to them saying, okay, but we have a terrible experience and this is a great experience. So now you're pitching your product from that angle. And then this is also the art more than science of go-to-market and salespeople that know how to tailor the right message to the right market, right? In terms of being proactive, then you're probably talking about it a lot on the podcast, but that's something that is one of the holy grails and in cybersecurity, and many people try to achieve that. I don't think we achieve that across the board, but definitely in this type of kind of fraud prevention versus detection, we went a step forward in being proactive. We look at what you do in a private way. Obviously, we invested almost a year just writing patents and technologies around privacy here. But we look at everything you do and we proactively tell the bank this is fine, this is not fine before they even need to approve or reject the transaction. Yeah, that's kind of the two aspects. One, the listening, and then taking the proactive approach that we've been trying to do since the beginning, and it's a journey. It's not like we solved everything, but this is the approach that we're taking throughout the journey.
I love that. I think there are some really kind of useful insights and nuggets of wisdom there, which will be so useful for the listeners who are kind of in the early stages and, thinking you need everything packaged up and refined and everything perfect before you take it to market. From what you were saying, that's really about kind of take something, even if it's not fully finished, because inevitably it's going to be the feedback that tailors the product much more than anything else.
Yeah, and look, and sometimes you believe this is finished. Like you feel like that's it, right? That's the thing. And taking it to the market, and I'm going to bring the gospel. But people look at it and say, what if it was a little different? Or I actually care about. There's a famous story about Waze, the navigation, the GPS navigation system. That in one of the surveys back in the day, people were mostly excited about the app telling them when they are going to arrive at work in the morning, even though they drive the same road and they don't actually need the navigation. They know the road like by heart. They really like that it's telling them exactly the time that they need to get. So sometimes you don't know which feature or capability or aspect of the product is going to resonate. And with us, we came with the fraud. Then we realized it's fraud, it's user experience, which is massive, and it's operational. Right? Fraud operations today in banks require a lot of people, manual review, a stack of services, orchestration between all of that. These are the things that you're not necessarily thinking about when you start the journey, but then when you talk to a lot of clients and get to know the problems better, you understand that this is another thing you can potentially solve, right? The tension between all those three aspects, operational cost or complexity, fraud, and UX, usually that tension leads to a trade-off. And everyone talk about this trade-off, right? I can make the experience, I can add friction, reduce fraud. I can take more fraud, reduce friction. Sometimes it's like who's stronger in the organization and just the internal decision. But when you come with a solution that shrinks this triangle, right? Improving UX and reducing fraud, not creating tension between them, that's something that, banks and organizations really like, right? That resonates with them.
Yeah.
From that point, you need to prove yourself, but at least the initial message is something that resonates.
I understand you've kind of taken all these learns and all the kind of feedback from the market. You successfully raised a significant amount of funding. So let's turn attention to how that's enabled and molded your kind of growth strategy and product development at Ironvest.
Yeah. So I don't know what followed what, right? I'm not sure that the raising money molded the product development and growth or the other way around. But when we started the journey, we knew that we are after a big thing, right? A big mission. We wanted to eliminate fraud in financial services and then across everything, which you always need a good vision to chase. Even if you're not getting the gold at the end of the rainbow, you still need to go after it. And then we knew it's going to take time to build the technology, to research. So we needed some time. We need to raise money for that. We need to get a great team behind us. And then the second stage was, okay, we had a solution. We started going to market. We saw the feedback. We also, some of us come from a background of selling to banks and financial institutions and government, etc. And we knew it's taking a lot of time to get the deals, right? To get the actual bookings, right? It's a journey. Lots of meetings, lots of decisions, pilots, proof of concepts, budgets, right? It's not a 3-month sale. It's a 1 to 2 years sale. So that's how we structured our business, right? And then as soon as we started getting good responses from the market and advancing as planned in the pipeline, then we raised another round to accelerate that growth. And this is where we are now, right? We are at the stage of proliferating the solution that already exists. At the same time, continue to develop it from the roadmap that we hear from the market and our own ideas, right? And that's where we are now. And we know it's going to take time to actually get into all those banks and financial institutions.
Well, I'm interested in understanding how you kind of balance the feedback, iterations to the product with actually, taking something to market.
Yeah. First of all, I will say the first goal or the main track is to take something to market, right? And you have to have, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have to have conviction, propose solution and the problem you're solving, right? And all those iterations come from, as I said, from listening and getting feedback and being open to it. But it all is built on top of your initial conviction. And also when you make those decisions, you need to glue them with your own understanding of the problem, of the solution, of the market, etc. So we first prioritize getting the next thing to the market or getting a solid thing to the market. And then we take the feedback, we mix it up with our own ideas, right? Not everything comes from the market. And we build a roadmap, right? This is something that, I and others have been doing in other situations as well. It's pretty much cross industry, right? This tech, this type of roadmap building and product positioning and development and management, etc. In our case, the iterations into production, into the market are pretty long because banks takes time, right? So we have time to experiment, we have time to show the different solutions in between. I'll say one thing that changed in the last year or two is that we are a lot more open to doing rapid prototyping of specific ideas, either that we get requests from clients or that we think about new solution. We do it very, very fast internally, sometimes like same day, using AI and AI coding and vibe coding and all of that. We use everything we can. It's not so helpful yet for the actual production, fully stabilized code and product, but it is very good to say, okay, I had an idea during a meeting. Let's send them a prototype in the morning, right? To get a feel of is it working, is it good, is it solving the problem, etc. And this is something that didn't really exist like a year ago. Doing a fast prototype for an idea that you have, you would have to slot it into the roadmap and spend 2 weeks and spend developer. And nowadays, I have a product manager or designer that's building it. Sometimes I build it and we show it to a client, we get feedback, we iterate. Then once we are a lot more certain about what to build, we take it into the hardcore product development team.
So it sounds like AI and vibe coding, and specifically the ability to prototype much quicker, gives you the ability to move faster because you're able to test these hypotheses, as you said, that you come up with in meetings or you come up in passing or in client conversations. You're able to create a prototype, test it, break it, fail fast, and move forward much
Yeah.
quicker because of the advances in AI.
Yeah, and that is a small price to significantly reduce the risk of building the wrong thing in your roadmap, right? So it's making your roadmap even more kind of tight and accurate because it was tested in a rapid prototyping, rapid iteration way. That's, I think, one thing that again was always part of the playbook, the theoretical playbook in product management and kind of go to market, but was always very hard to actually pursue and
Mm,
implement. And now it's getting real in terms of you can have your app idea in the front of a client or front of your own team
mm,
same day or within a week and test it, right?
mm,
It's again, as I said, I'm being cautious here because it's almost never until now production ready code. It's usually being scrapped and rebuilt, but just the ability to test it and more on the product management and design side, that's gold, right?
mm.
That's really helping because since you asked about how we balance and build a roadmap, etc., that's a really solid practice that's completely new. We are still
Mm.
learning how to use it the best way possible, but we love it so far.
So instead of having to waste a load of time thinking and deliberating on whether it's the best course of action, you can just test really quickly and get the answers.
Exactly. And even because you can actually build things that work and look real. Sometimes they are real, maybe not hardened, but real. Even your clients can take them and distribute them in the organization, get internal feedback. As I said, selling into a bank involves a lot of stakeholders, a
Mm,
lot of internal discussions, and sometimes you need to give your own champion in the sales process something to work with, right? So up until recently, you would send them a deck, presentation, or a one pager, or you had a website. That's basically what you could do for them, right?
mm,
To go and pitch internally and have a discussion and all that. Now I can give them here's how it's gonna look like. Show it around, have people use it, have even real users or real testers or whatever, right? And that helps a lot, both to us and to the champions who try to buy the product.
that makes sense. And on the topic of AI, I'm interested in sort of understanding with all these kind of emerging AI threats and the more sophisticated AI attacks, what are the main trends you're paying attention to at Ironvest?
Yeah, that's huge. And again, this is uh you know timing on one hand in terms of like being in the right time to be able to solve those new types of attacks, which we hope we are. Combination of adapting fast. When we started Ironvest, deepfakes were not as strong as they are now, right? For example, now it's pretty easy to generate them and everyone's spooked, right? Or if you talk to contact centers in banks and other organizations, many of them implemented voice identification, right? But voice is very hard. It's very easy today to spoof. So what do you do with that new, completely new threat vector that you just solved, right? You just bought the solution, just deployed it, etc. We see ourselves and our solution as really the kind of the front lines of those new attacks. We almost the more we advance, we see that you know this is really the front that we need to address, the front of the fraud prevention and fraud vectors in general. So you look at deepfake, you look at ability of AI agents to generate clicks and behavior and activity in the website, very similar to a human. You look at all sorts of you look at scams that are very easy to generate using ChatGPT or Dark GPT or all those models, right? And banks, amongst other organizations, they don't have the defenses right now, and they understand it's coming fast. It's not yet fully operational, luckily, but they understand it's coming fast. And our solution is basically built for those type of attacks and is evolving more and more to be able to address them. Because remember, if I go back to the beginning, at the end of the day, you can try whatever you want, but if I have the ability to know that throughout the action, you are doing that action, and I can cryptographically seal that proof and take it all the way back to the bank, then it doesn't really matter what you do in between. So yeah, these are the things that we hear a lot in the market right now. These are the fears. It's not necessarily the fraud that is already happening, but this is what keeps, CISOs and CIOs and heads of fraud, up at night, because they still don't have ways to deal with that, and they still don't have the solutions. They still don't have the partners, the vendors, etc. And we try to help them.
And I guess that's created an incredible kind of opportunity as kind of bleak and scary as it is on the one hand, it creates a fantastic opportunity for companies such as Ironvest to actually solve these problems, because these are not threats that are going away. They're kind of evolving, they're changing, they're becoming more sophisticated. And for all its benefits that AI brings, it does create a lot of sort of challenges as well.
It is never pleasant to admit, but for people who work in fraud prevention and cybersecurity and all that, every new technology and attack vector and platform that is being attacked is another opportunity, right? You see that across the board. There's new types of cyber attacks, there's new attack vectors, and there's a new market of security tools that help solve that, right? No one wants to benefit on new bad things that come into the market on the one hand, but on the other hand, this is what we do, right? For many, many years, we look at what are the next threats that threatening our almost way of life, right? In the internet, in the digital world. We get used to it. We want more digital. No one wants to go to the bank. We all want, fintech and digital experience. And there are upcoming threats that are threatening to disrupt that. And companies like Ironvest and many, many others are going after those bad people and try to stop them.
Just before we wrap up, I wanted to ensure that I kind of got some time to speak specifically about your personal journey. You've worked at some of the larger kind of corporations. You also had experience with startups before starting Ironvest. What's that transition been like, and what's been the kind of this key lessons and maybe takeaways you would impart on some of the listeners who are going through that journey themselves?
Yeah, no, that's a big question. But one of the things that come to mind is, let's call it self-selection. Like, you really need to want that. And I realized that with myself. And this is also the way I'm hiring and looking at candidates. You really need to want to be in a startup. That means you want to give up the comfort of an enterprise. You want to give up the guardrails. If your chair is broken, sometimes you need to go and buy your own chair, right? And sometimes you need to deal with stuff yourself. You have a lot more range of responsibility. You need to be a lot more open-minded and change things fast, sometimes on a daily basis. And if it's not coming from internal motivation that this is what I want to do, it is very hard to generate this motivation.
I think that's such a good lesson to leave the listeners with. So, Kfir, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Your candor, your willingness to share with the listeners and be very open and transparent about the journey. Some of the greatest sort of innovations and some of the greatest successes you've had at the company are not actually initially where you were kind of looking or thinking or aiming, but it was your ability to kind of be humble and to respond to the feedback you were getting from customers. So thank you so much for your contribution and for your time.
I think this was a great conversation, David. Thank you so much for the insightful questions.